Ever wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons in a post-nuclear wasteland? Wasteland's story is pure Fallout with a little Terminator thrown in. So the US puts an AI in charge of its missile defense system to protect itself from Russia. The AI, named Cochise, becomes sentient and figures out that humanity is its biggest threat. Cochise reports a meteor storm as a Russian missile attack, which the US responds by launching its own missiles, which leads to Russia actually launching its missiles and killing off most of humanity. Cochise then starts pumping out robots to wipe out what's left. You are a group known as the Rangers who try to keep law in the post-apocalyptic nuclear wasteland. Not that the game actually explains most of this. Like most RPGs of the era, you're supposed to just figure things out through environmental clues and a few dialogue options and the pure power of your imagination. Now, the first thing you do in this game is create a character, and that's where you really see the first influence of Dungeons and Dragons. You start by rolling your attributes. You just keep hitting random until you get the numbers that you think look good. And then you pick some skills that you want to level up, even though you have no idea what skills will actually be useful. And then you're thrown out into a big open world with no direction, no guidance, and no idea what you're doing. And it was pretty common for RPGs of this time to take influence from Dungeons and Dragons. In fact, if you watch my Final Fantasy I video, which came out 1 year after Wasteland, what separated Final Fantasy from other RPGs of the time was that it wasn't like Dungeons & Dragons. But everything else about Wasteland is pure Fallout, and you see the influences everywhere. The nuclear apocalypse, moral choices, building your characters with skill and attributes, especially in how it looks. The world map has you as a chess piece moving around. When you get into conversations or fights, you see a little GIF of who you're talking to or trying to kill. And the game starts with you being thrown into a big open world with no guidance, no direction, and I died almost immediately because I didn't know you needed water just to survive walking around. And that's kind of Wasteland's whole thing. It has some really good ideas wrapped in some really terrible execution. Take the world map. Like I said, you can see all the little locations and little squares, but the direction that you enter towns from will affect where you start when you enter that town. So if I wanted to get to the other side of town, I could just exit onto the world map, walk around to the other side of the town, and then enter from that direction. Unfortunately, when you start actually interacting with the world is when the cracks start to show. For example, the use command, which seems pretty straightforward. But if you're using a grenade, you need to use it in a particular direction. If you're using an item, you need to use it where you're standing. But you don't use ammo to reload your gun. You just go into your inventory and click on your ammo to reload your gun. And talking to people is the same way. Sometimes just walking near someone will start a conversation. Other times you need to separate one of your party members to have them talk to someone. Or I had an early mission where I was supposed to give a visa to a guy, and I couldn't figure out who the guy was because he never spoke to me or stopped me. I had to use the item on him to start the conversation. And the game lets you hire people, but if you want to hire them, you have to start a conversation. And the way you start a conversation with random people is by starting an encounter, basically starting a fight, which also took me a while to figure out near the beginning because I had a mission where I had to rescue people. And by rescue, it didn't just mean kill all the people around them. You actually had to hire them onto your team and then disband them from your team for them to be rescued. And the only way I figured this out was with the journal. Now, I played the remastered version, and if you're going to play this game, I would recommend it. Because one of the things the remastered version added was a journal that keeps track of your missions and the many passwords that you use and the people that you meet and where you are in the story. And then it turns out that hiring people onto your team is the easy part. Controlling them is the hard part. You start the game by creating 4 characters, but you can have a party of 7 if you hire other NPCs. And until the late game, most people you can hire are just bullet sponges that can carry some extra inventory for you. But the first problem is everyone has their own inventory and their own money. The only way you can move money from one character to another is by pooling all of your money onto one character. So there was one point where I got sewer rot and I had to go to a doctor to heal it. So I would pool all my money onto one character, go through the doctor's dialogue tree to get healed, then exit the dialogue tree, move all my money onto the next character, and repeat. NPCs on your team can also refuse orders, which sounds like an interesting mechanic, but it usually just boiled down to telling them to do a thing twice and then they would do it. So less interesting and more just wasting time. And speaking of wasting time, every person you hire starts at low level. So every time you hire someone, you have to go back to grinding. And combat was the one time an NPC not listening to you was really annoying. So when you tell one of your main characters to attack, you can tell them which target to attack, and you can tell them to attack with a single attack, a burst attack, which attacks one enemy several times, or an auto attack, which uses your entire clip, but it attacks several enemies. But with hired NPCs, you can't tell them who to attack or how, you just tell them to attack. So there were many situations when I would have an NPC waste an entire clip on one enemy. And if you told the character to attack an enemy who was dead before that character took their turn, they wouldn't do anything at all. And melee in combat was completely pointless. See, when you start a fight, it tells you how far away an enemy is, and they sort of appear on the map. So if you have a melee character, they need to spend several of their turns just getting into melee range. And by the time they got there, the target was usually dead anyway. So I just gave everyone guns. And grinding felt more like a waste of time than in most games. Because enemies don't drop money, most of the fights just felt like I was using up ammo. There was one area where I was clearing out this agricultural farm, and I found a cave. So I decided to work my way through the cave, killing enemies every 2 steps, just to find out at the end of the cave was an exit back to the world map. Like I said in the beginning, it feels like a lot of this game is just trying to add its time. Oh, and one thing that really annoys me about combat is for some reason, when an enemy dies, they're always allowed to get one more hit off. I don't know why that is. But the game basically forces you to grind in order to get new characters up to level or to improve your skills. When you make your characters in the beginning, you need to choose what skills to put some points into, but you have no idea what's going to matter later on. Now, that's fine when a skill check stops you from opening a safe or recruiting one particular person. It's not okay when it locks you away from finding a key item that you need to progress the story. I needed to find a key on a desk, and I couldn't because my perception wasn't high enough to actually see it. So I had to go back to grinding levels, but even then, how you gain points isn't really clear. See, when you gain a level, the game doesn't actually tell you that you gained a level. You need to radio back into your base, and they'll tell you if you earned enough XP to gain a level. And even then, you can only increase your attributes. If you want to increase your skill points, you have to find one of the very few libraries that exist in the world. So when I couldn't find this key, I had to grind, then radio into my base, then go to a completely other town that had a library so I could up my perception. And the other way this game wastes your time is with healing. In the early game, the way you heal is by finding a doctor who will charge you money, or by literally waiting. You find somewhere safe and you can either camp, which means spamming one button over and over and over, or you just hold down the escape key, which makes time move faster and you heal over time. Now, spamming camp over and over is slightly faster, but it also meant you had to keep spamming a button. And by the late game, fully healing my team could take over 20 actual real-world minutes. So I just put my controller down on top of the escape key and went and made lunch or did my laundry or something. Eventually I picked up the medic skill because I thought that would heal my party, but no. The Wasteland does the D&D thing where you fall unconscious, and if you're unconscious for long enough, then you die, and medic just saves you from being unconscious so you can start healing again. And when I said to heal, you have to find someplace safe, that is because most places in Wasteland aren't safe. There are random encounters on the world map, but also in towns and in buildings. And when you grind long enough, you notice that they start reusing the assets for what enemies look like, which is fine when you're fighting animals out in the desert. Little weird when the local church's main torturer looks like an 80s biker. And over the course of all this grinding, I managed to get some really impressive weapons, and I was saving them because I assumed that there was going to be some big final fight against Cochise and its robot army. But no, the game ends with a puzzle where you have to press 4 computers in the right order twice. I had an entire inventory of missiles and explosives that went unused and unloved. And then after you take down Cochise, you get a very Fallout style ending where it shows you all the results of the choices you made. Now, I kind of rushed through the game, so my ending wasn't great. Some crime lords were in charge of towns and mutants ran wild through the wastelands. But this game took me nearly 30 hours to get through. And if you cut out all the grinding and healing, it probably would have been about half that. I like the story. I like the characters. I like the presentation. I like the idea of a lot of the mechanics. But the grinding, the waiting, the skill gating, it drags down what could have been a really good experience. So if you have the patience and the tolerance for old school game design, you should definitely give Wasteland a shot. If not, go play Fallout 1 and 2. Really good. See you next time.